Yo, what is going on, everybody? Good morning and happy Friday over here on the West Coast. I know some of you guys are over there on the East Coast, so good afternoon to everybody out there that's listening. Joining me today and helping to recap Thursday Night Football, talking about some of the slated games this weekend, as well as we're going to be setting lineups for y'all. Joining me today is going to be Boss Man himself, founder of Sportstopia HQ, Mr. Daryl. I got Cody Carpentier right along my side. And then last but certainly not least, Calvin Domingo, aka Steezy A Smith. How's everybody doing?
Awesome. How you doing, Steezy?
I'm
Cody,
feeling
how are
blessed. I'm
you?
feeling great.
I,
Cody?
I'm doing I'm doing fantastic. I just wanted to say I think you kind of undercut the intro there with Daryl. Daryl two-time Snyder right there. Daryl two-time. I think he
I should
deserves
have
that.
said that.
No, but I'm
So,
doing fantastic.
man, lovely. That's lovely music to my ears. Like Cody was talking about, y'all, Mr. Daryl Bossman over here, two-time Millie Maker winner. Man, let's get right into it. Obviously, some people might or might not know this, but if you're on the show, that means good things, especially on a Friday morning. So, Daryl, talk to me about last night. What happened? Why did it happen? How did it happen? Give me all the details.
Wow, that's a lot. You might have to cut me off. There are a lot of things there, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, when I had a vision of the optimizer at the beginning of last year, one of the things that I set as a goal was to become one of the top players in the world using it because I'm a firm believer if you're not a product of the product, then people are going to say, are you using it? How are you doing with it? And if you say, nah, they're going to kind of look at you. So I set a goal to win 2 milli makers in NFL, and we're one game into the fourth uh, game, I guess, right? First game into the fourth, and I have won two technically. I tied the first time with 134 people, sliced up at about a little less than 11,000. Then last night there were 74 of us, and nice, 18,800 something. So I'm going to raise my goal. I don't want to stop at two, but there was a lot of things that went into it. It's easy. I mean, if you want, it's not, we have the optimizer. I know it's up there in the right hand corner.
Mhm.
7 live player projection feeds, the top player projection feeds in the world. We simulate the outcome of a game up to 50,000 times. But a lot of people, they'll try the optimizer for $1 for 7 days and they'll just hit generate lineups, right? And then they'll see like our proprietary blend and they'll just like, wow, that's really cool. If you do that, fine, but you're not going to get different. And to win,
All right.
you got to make some stands and you have to get different. So I wrote an article yesterday. I gave it to Ed. I don't think it qualified to the quality of what you guys write, so it hasn't yet hit the Sportopia site. But it was about, think about it. If you're going to prepare yourself for the possibilities of winning $1 million, right? How would you prepare? A lot of people play fantasy and it's just for fun. They want to follow Love if they're a Green Bay fan, or Dobbs or Detroit, they want to follow, right? So they just kind of jam in their players, right, and root for them. But the professionals, as I studied, I've been playing since the late '90s before the internet, and it's it's not a coincidence that most of the money is won by 3% of the people that are professionals. They take time. They look at game theory. Like yesterday, I listened to what you guys talk about. The Packers had some guys out on their line on the offense. They had a DB out. So you look at that, right? Jones was coming back from injury. Watson was going to be playing for the first time. In the showdown slate, it's captain, which gives you a 1.5, and then your flex players, and you have kickers to choose from and defense. And I made a stand. I wasn't going to let the kickers beat me, so I just said I eliminated kickers. I went into pro settings and but no kickers. I like Montgomery. A lot of people like Gibbs. I think Gibbs is going to be crazy good, but I think Montgomery's proven he's the man. He came out of Chicago. Detroit paid him some money. They got rid of Swift, right? Um, so I had him overweight in captain, which ended up being he was only 9% owned in the captain, so I was 91% ahead of the field. I like Detroit's D. I like both these, but I like Detroit's. I weighted them, and I mean, I took time. I take out like on Thursdays and Sundays and Mondays. I take time out and I prepare, right? And then when I go to the optimizer, I put my preparation in, and I'm a sponge for knowledge. Cody, you do a great job of putting together your top, different. And I use that going Sunday. I'll look at that and see. But I've trained my brain to be contrarian. That's why the name. You got to get different, right? I mean, almost all the time I used to look. I'd never be near the top, and I go to the top and I look at somebody they played, and I'd be like, "What?
Where did he come from?"
Percent owned." and then I mean, Cody, right? It's like interject there.
That's the that's the undercover guys, right? That's the guys that you really have to sit here and read through them and talk about them, find out the names of those guys, because a lot, like you said, it's the top percentage of players that take in most of the money in these competitions, and it's because they are digging day in and day out on the injury reports, on the snap counts, on the target shares, on the growing of opportunities, and that's like for me, and I don't play in as many as these as you do, but I play a little bit. And if I did devote all of my time towards that, that's where I think I would be good is finding those deep guys, because I enjoy, reading through the injury reports, reading through the target shares, the growth of opportunity and things like that. And I think that's where kind of like you mentioned it, and kind of like guys that we've talked about the last few weeks, whether it's the Jaden Reeds while he was coming up, or the Marvin Mimses, or Wan'Dale Robinson. We're going to talk about him today. Like guys like that, where you can just steadily see it growing, and the vast majority of the population do not even pay attention to those guys because they're so stuck on like, oh, I got to play AJ Brown. Oh, we got to play that stack with Patrick Mahomes. And it's like, they don't even think about the guys down here. So that's 100%. I think you hit the nail on the head as far as what it takes to kind of be up there. That's just a little part of it though.
And Daryl, I mean,
go ahead, Steezy. Yeah, interject.
Yeah, something that you said earlier, it just really stuck with me because I'm a real big quote guy, and this might not be verbatim, but you said something along the lines of, if you had the opportunity to make $1 million, how would you prepare for it? And I just think that that's the perfect way to kind of, go about it. And especially with Cody, going back to what Cody was saying, if he was to devote more of his time to this, he'd probably be making him some real money himself too, or even more money than he already does. And so I just think that's definitely something that a lot more people should keep in mind, because Daryl, like you said, some people, they look at the optimizer and they kind of just leave it at that. They're not putting any of their own thinking. They're not adding any extra time into, research and whatnot. And so, Daryl, I mean, this is the second time you've been on the show in the last, 3 weeks. And I have a feeling that's going to happen a lot more often than not, especially with the way that your success has been, kind of coming on. And so that's real dope to see. As you guys can see, it's at the top right-hand corner of the screen, but that QR code, man, make sure y'all scan that. And if you want to get contrarian with it, if you want to make $1 million, or at least have an opportunity to make $1 million like Daryl and the 170 plus people that he was tied with, be sure to scan that QR code. You get a 7-day test trial for just $1. Daryl,
yeah, I want to add one thing before you bring Corey in, but yeah, I mean, the opportunities there. We have a disclaimer. I mean, I'm all about, we don't guarantee anything. We call it education, entertainment. Because I have won a couple times, that doesn't mean I'm going to win again. But I would like you to reserve a spot for me Monday on Monday's show. But
Yeah.
now that being said,
Deal.
It's really about watching the information. Cody and Steezy, I mean, if they go to the Sportstopia site, you're going to see, and I keep talking about Cody because I like to, you do it by position, right, Cody? And I made a mistake Monday, and I didn't have OZ in any of my lineups. It was that the second 2-game Monday night slate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had the Eagles in Tampa Bay, and I locked. There was no way Hurts and Brown were going to beat me. They were in everything that I had. But then you got Devontae Smith because Hurts is getting all the attention. And like the first or second play of the game, I saw OZ went over the middle and the ball just like went off his fingertips. And I go, right? I didn't play him, but then later in the game, he didn't get missed,
Yeah.
and so there was a guy, right? And that's what happened. The guys that sliced it up took a big piece because they were looking, as Cody said, it's hard for people to click on some of these players, right? I want Hurts, I want Devontae Smith. If I like Baker, I want Evans, I want Godwin, right? But all of a sudden, Palmer, and people. So that's what I'll leave with is, try to get different. Try to listen to the information, read the articles, see who's injured. That's the big thing, right? People, Chargers, you guys are probably going to cover this. Big Mike Williams is out, so
Yeah.
Keenan Allen probably going to be chalk. But go ahead, Cody.
I just wanted to say before you departed, I wanted to say, like, part of the optimizer, one of the great utilities that you can do in it, and you've talked about it before the show and even to the start right now, but is the pro setting your pro options, which is being able to do exactly kind of what you're talking about in like fading, a defense or fading a kicker. You can put like that. You can say, well, I want 0% of this specific thing, or I want 50% of this, 40% of this, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's just a great tool to be able to utilize as the pro option inside the optimizer to have like a max or a minimum exposure to a certain player. And that's exactly what we're talking about. It's like, if there's a guy that's further down, mentioned the same name again, Wan'Dale Robinson last week, he had 22% snaps, 5 targets. Like, we're expecting that to grow. So that's a guy that, like, if you want to play him, you're going to go in there because maybe he's not going to get immediately plugged in by the optimizer because there's really just not enough on paper for the majority of the world to pick up on him, right? So it's going to be a guy you're going to go, oh, guess what I want? I want X percentage of this guy. And it's going to force him into those lineups and make it optimal with him inside of it. And I think that's just one thing that you mentioned before that I wanted to make sure that the populace kind of understood, was that you can literally, still have your opinion on a couple guys and then have this thing just completely build you some immaculate rosters and lineups. And that's how that's just part of it. But yeah.
One more thing, and then I'll go. But the same mistake I made in what you said. I love Dallas's defense last Sunday. I'm like, Dallas, Arizona. I knew Diggs was out, but I thought they were going to rally around, and I locked Dallas, right? And then Buffalo against the Commanders. Buffalo had 33 defensive points. You weren't going to catch that. This weekend, no matter who I love on defense, I'm going to get diverse because I don't want to miss that next, right? So again, I'm teaching myself, even if you get attached, try to have some diversity, try to get contrarian. So thank you guys. Steezy A, I appreciate it. Good to see you and Cody always. And Corey, I know you're coming out there from behind the curtain, but thanks guys. I'm going to watch the rest of the show and I appreciate you having me on, but
appreciate
real
you, Daryl.
fast. Thank you, Daryl. But real fast, before you go though, can you just give me, if you have somebody at the top of your head, because I know some people are going to want to pick your brains here a little bit, but can you give me a sleeper at any position, regardless of position, regardless of salary, whatever it may be, but give me a sleeper, a deep sleeper, I guess, for this weekend. Just a name you want to throw out there that more people should be aware of.
I'll be totally honest. I focus on one slate at a time, and I like college football. We don't have college football. We will have it. I'm looking at Notre Dame rebounding against Duke. So, Wan'Dale Robinson, obviously Cody's thrown that name out. If everybody hears it, I don't have enough. I know there's an early showdown with Atlanta and Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville got their, Houston did it to them again. If I had to pick somebody out, I'm not sure if Zay Jones is playing or not. I know he's been questionable. He's out again. Yeah. I don't know how different it would be, but I kind of like maybe Christian Kirk in that game if he's not going to be. I go to the optimizer, and again, I've trained my brain. We have our own proprietary player projections, and I want to see where everybody's going. And unless it's just like, when you have a main slate, you want to be. So I'll look at the low ownership. But Stevie, I wish I could throw somebody. I'll throw Kirk out there. He's not. I think Lawrence is going to throw, but he's probably not. I'll give you guys a pick. Maybe during the show, I'll text you or whatever, and you can see, or you can save it for an article or something. But I appreciate it. I don't want to just make a guy up.
No, you're good. I appreciate you being honest.
I got a sleeper for you. His name's Daryl Snyder, and he's going to be back in the Millie Maker this weekend. I'll give you that one right there. There's your sleeper.
Yeah, I like that. I'm for that. Thank you, guys.
Daryl, thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And then Cody, while we're waiting for Corey here, man, let's I guess finish up with Thursday Night Football. Do you have any big takeaways from either side, from any team, either team?
So going in, if you follow me on Twitter, I was big on Luke Musgrave breaking out yesterday. He ended up with 1 target, 1 reception, and a yard, ended up with a concussion in the second quarter. And then he ended up departing that game, not coming back. I think one of the bigger takeaways was they just need to keep getting the ball to Jaden Reed. On the Detroit side of the things, like that running game is ridiculous with this offensive line. It was dominant, pushing downfield and opening holes for Montgomery, who had 32 carries in this game, which was tying a career high that he hasn't had in 3 years since he was in Chicago. He had 32 carries against Minnesota and scoring 3 touchdowns with that. So I think this Detroit offensive line is just staying dominant. And I think one of the last things I want to say is just Jahmyr Gibbs. People are overreacting so heavily on Jahmyr Gibbs. His efficiency is so obvious, and how he runs the football, he's going to be just fine. And everyone's like, well, this is just DeAndre Swift again. It's like, well, first off, Montgomery and Gibbs are better than Jamal Williams and Swift were, and that was a great duo. But Swift kind of just like burnt his opportunities up in Detroit with injuries and stuff. They love Gibbs. They don't want him to get hurt. I'll leave it at that. They don't want him to get hurt. They want him for the long run. Right? He goes in there and has 8 carries and 5 targets. Like, that's what they want right now. Let him continue to softly grow. And you know what? In fantasy football, it's not going to help us right now, but I promise you down the stretch, you're going to be very happy Gibbs is on your bench. I'll leave it at that.
Man, well, appreciate that, Cody. Speaking of helping out our fantasy teams, we got another guest or another co-host hopping onto the show. So everybody, please welcome my good friend, my good man, should be appearing on the screen, Corey Parson at the Fantasy Exec. Should be hopping on anytime now. Here he is. Man, how we feeling, Corey?
Ain't nothing much. Feeling good, you know what I'm saying? And, I think Cody just mentioned the key thing when he talked about Jahmyr Gibbs. He said you're going to be happy you have him on your bench. And that's where he belongs, like right now, depending on your depth. He's got to be a player that's coming off your bench because, obviously he's a talented guy, but you know what I'm saying? He's not ready to fully rock and roll yet. What's going on, fellas?
They just straight up don't need, and that's the best. I think that's the big takeaway is like they put up 34 points in the Packers and given him 13 opportunities. And if you looked at the box score straight up for the Lions the last couple of weeks, like the target consolidation has been narrowed. It's like St. Brown, Laporta, Gibbs, and then you might get a Khalif Raymond last week. And this week it's Josh Reynolds. It's like it's consolidated, and they're focusing on the running game. And if you watched last night, that offensive line was dominant. So they don't need him right now. And I think down the line they will need him. But yeah, just like you said, he belongs on the bench currently. But the talent is so evident and so easy that people, I think there is a little bit of a overreaction on Twitter last night and this morning just about, Gibbs isn't good. Gibbs is DeAndre Swift. And DeAndre Swift, I think, was a different animal with some injuries and other things. So people just need to kind of pump the brakes on Mr. Jahmyr Gibbs.
Right, and this is more season long, and so we'll kind of touch on that just a little bit. But there are a lot of fantasy owners out there that have Jahmyr Gibbs as a running back 1, and so what do you tell to those people? Because I know we're telling them, bench Gibbs, but what do you do at running back if he's your number 1 guy? Is there anybody out there potentially on a waiver wire, maybe somebody out there that you could possibly trade for whose value is down? Would you suggest that they trade for Derrick Henry, who could be a buy low candidate right now? Cody, I'll start with you, but where would you go? How would you pivot if Jahmyr Gibbs was your RB1?
I guess my first thing would be if Jahmyr Gibbs is your running back 1, you probably didn't have a great draft just because of kind of where he was going off and
how you missed the chance to pivot
on how you attack the draft this year was kind of on your own, knowing a rookie like this. Bijan got up to be a top 5, top 6 pick in drafts going into the season, and like even that was a little hot because like everybody knows these rookies, like it's very rare that they come in and just take over the lion's share. So if you expected Gibbs to take over that share, that was your first mistake. And I think where you messed up first. If you talk about guys you want to kind of go after and get, Derrick Henry, of course, everybody knows. Also coupled with his 2023 season is this offensive line is going to struggle throughout the entire season. So generally everyone's like, well, Derrick Henry starts slow. He's going to come on. He's going to be averaging 5.5 yards per carry come December. Yeah, but what about if this team is, DeAndre Hopkins does not look good right now. Treylon Burks does not look good right now. Ryan Tannehill sucks. Like, what if they're just completely depleted by December and everybody knows Derrick Henry's the only guy they have? Like, that could be a situation where you don't want to be stuck holding that bag. There's a lot of guys, I think, that are just free agents or young that you can go after and you can target, whether it's Roshan Johnson in Chicago. Jerick McKinnon is one that is very pukey and very ugly. We talked about ugly plays earlier with Daryl on here, but like McKinnon's a guy that you saw what he did in the receiving game last week, or not last week, but last year, coupled with now last week, they're starting to use him even more. Aside of Isaiah Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So there's guys down in that tier that I think you can continue to attack. Zach Moss, he's got over 50 carries the last 2 weeks for Indianapolis, and Jonathan Taylor is supposed to be coming back next week. Will he play in Indianapolis? I would say that's about a 15% chance that he plays a snap in Indianapolis. So with that being said, Zach Moss is there, right? Zach Moss is owned in most spots now after back-to-back 30-carry weeks. Trey Sermon is equally as pukey as Zach Moss has been the last 5 years. Trey Sermon's the guy behind Zach Moss. So if the opportunity is there, this offensive line is fine. Very good. Top 5, I would say. And I think Trey Sermon's a guy that if you're in kind of like these deep season leagues, I'm adding guys like Trey Sermon. As much as I'm not a fan of Trey Sermon, this offensive line is good enough to open holes and make opportunity, as you're already seeing with Zach Moss.
That's an excellent point right there. Good stuff. Definitely can't complain about that one right there.
Do you have anybody in mind, Corey?
As far as running backs, my waiver wire is a disaster. I'm going to go get Trey Sermon. You know what I'm saying? It's just there's nothing out there. You playing 20 you playing leagues with 20 roster spots. You know what I'm saying? And you put a couple stakes behind it. You almost can forget about finding anything on those leagues. Everybody's really on top of stuff and things like that. It's just one of those things. My man John Hanson would always say: when you get caught in a situation like this, you just got to deal with it.
That's the fact. That's the facts. That's
just what it is. I love it. I love it. Before we move on to our next topic, we're going to be breaking down some of the games in this weekend's slate. Because Cody, I asked you this, but Corey, do you have any fantasy takeaways from last night's Thursday Night Football matchup?
That Detroit Lions run defense is legit. I think you definitely like to see what they're doing. Last week, they held the Atlanta Falcons, who love to run the football, to 2.2 yards a carry. This week, they hold the Packers, another team that like to run the football, 2.3 yards an attempt. So that run defense is stout. Aaron Glenn looking like a coordinator of the year candidate. What he's doing, because that run defense was a weakness of that team, and now it's one of their strengths. Right. They've drafted well. Listen, let's relax on them now. They're not the Philadelphia Eagles, but I'm very excited to see what that defense has been able to do. And Jordan Love is he's going to have his moments. Like, he has a lot of patting the football and throwing the ball out of bounds, and then so he really shows flashes of both. You can't get either too hot or too cold one way on him. He's still learning and developing, but you see, at some time he flashes brilliance, and at some time he's Dak Prescott.
Yeah, 2 picks and a fumble. He didn't lose it, but he's starting to turn the ball over. That's 4 picks now in his last 2 games. We'll see what happens moving forward, but I think the shine, it's starting to lose a little bit.
He's still putting up fantasy numbers.
He is. Yeah, I think he had 19 yesterday, despite the turnovers, and so
he's still putting up fantasy numbers. But if you're a Packer fan, it's let's not start the fit. Let's not get him fitted for the gold jacket yet.
Nah, that was always premature.
They was ready for it though.
Of course, I get it. It's understandable. But now that we've, I guess, finished up with Thursday Night Football, we'll move on to the next topic, and I want to break down some of these games on the slate. And I want to start off with the highest total of the entire slate. You got the Buffalo Bills at home in a divisional matchup against the surging hot Miami Dolphins. Buffalo is currently 2.5-point favorites. I don't know if that line has since shifted since the last time I checked. Over under, I think 52.5 or 53.5. Corey, I'm going to hand you the baton first. Man, like I said, highest scoring output of the slate. A lot of guys that are fantasy worthy, but talk to me about this matchup.
So let's just let's get into the game theory that Darryl was talking about earlier, and how do you expect this game to go? Bills a 2.5-point favorite at home. Historically, the Buffalo Bills have been much better than the Miami Dolphins, particularly in their building. But obviously, right now, Miami's coming in here on a heater. The quarterback playing well. So really, when you look at it and break it down, okay, what is this game? This game is Buffalo's defense versus Miami's offense. So if Buffalo is going to have the favorite, Buffalo is the favorite, they're going to have to be a little bit more stout on defense. I don't think you're going to see all that running the football. So this is going to be a heavy spot for Tyreek Hill, a heavy spot for Jalen Waddle. But you're coming back with Buffalo's playmakers as well, James Cook and Diggs and those guys. So a lot of fantasy options. I think you fire up everybody. You know what I'm saying? And the difference maker could be a guy like a Gabe Davis or a whatever that Craig Kraft or whatever, something like that is. But you're definitely going to see a lot of points. I think you see a good back and forth between these two teams because I don't think that Buffalo is shutting Miami's Dolphin offense down.
I would agree on the same thing. When you look back to last year in a couple of these games that they played, it was 34-31 in the playoffs last year, 32-29. Both of those games were in Buffalo in December and January. And I think that what we're seeing from the Miami Dolphins right now is completely clicking. I think they're going to be able to run the ball to a certain extent, not like last week, of course. Denver couldn't tackle a damn person. Christopher Brooks was a guy that came in late, had 9 carries and broke 5 tackles. That's not going to happen this week for all these guys again. But I do think that this is going to be one of the better games that we see this year. Not only this week, I think it'll be the best this year. Yeah, because you're talking about Buffalo, who started out kind of slow. They're starting to come on right now quietly because Miami is getting all the conversation. I think Miami's going to come in there. It's going to be a good game. If I had to pick this one, honestly, I'm picking Buffalo this week. I just think that this is a perfect spot for them to kind of say, hey, you remember, we're still here, right? Sounds like Jalen Waddle will be back. But James Cook has been strong. James Cook on the opposite side has been quietly, like I mentioned with the Buffalo Bills in general, he's been quietly strong all year. You're going to play your Tyreek Hills in this game. You're going to play your Stephon Diggs. They both have good matchups this week. Tyreek Hill against Christian Benford, who's outside the top 50 on the cornerback rankings that my buddy does over at playerprofiler.com. And Tyreek Hill just unstoppable force right now at the wide receiver position. So you have to play him in all your spots, especially in DFS this week. Obviously, don't need to say that again. But James Cook looking good. You mentioned River Craycraft. I think he's interesting. You also have the tight ends, right? The Kincaids, the Knoxes, the Smythes. I think these are all 3 of these options. Again, I'm going to keep saying Smythe every week just because he's at the bottom of the barrel. But I think Kincaid, another rookie who they've talked about wanting to use more and more over the offseason. I think you're going to continue to see that build. And this is kind of a game where, you need to score points. It's going to be a 30-30 game somewhere in that ballpark. So you're going to need to be getting the ball spread out. So there's not going to be a tight consolidation to one guy like we've seen before. I think you're going to see it spread out, and some guys are going to come out of the woodwork, and maybe Khalil Shakir catches a touchdown, Dalton Kincaid somewhere in that ballpark. So I think this is going to be a really fun game. Like I mentioned, not even the best game of the week, but the best game of the year in that conversation.
And I think you could see a big special teams play in this game as well. A game like this would normally come down to a special teams play.
I like that.
I wouldn't put it past any of these teams. Hey, Cody, I need you to talk to Terrell for me, because he's so low on James Cook, man. I don't know why there's all this hate on Buffalo Bills running backs, but I was trying to tell him on the show this other day. So, next time y'all work, hammer it home for me because I can't seem to get to him.
I got you. And again, I'm not the biggest James Cook guy because he's, I think he this is just a very blatant, basic opinion, but I think he runs in the same style that his brother does, Delvin. But the thing is he's 15 pounds lighter. So I've never been the one to trust James Cook, but he's shown us this year, hey, I'm getting opportunities and I'm going to make the most of it with it. And I like James Cook as a player, but I guess my innate sense has been to fade him over the course of his career just because of his size, apropos to his brother and the injury history. So, but James Cook fits great in this offense, and they're actually dumping the ball off to him, and they're actually utilizing guys like Latavius Murray and Damian Harris with James Cook. And I'm not going to play either of those guys.
Yeah,
but
the Lat Murray thing is, oh my God,
it's weird, isn't it?
I'm looking at the jersey, and I'm like Murray, DeMarco. And I'm like,
vultures, man.
Then I'm like, Lat. Oh no, not Lat. Man, I think I've owned Lat Murray in a fantasy team for a decade now. You know what I'm saying? Like
when he was first on the Raiders, I remember those days.
Oh my goodness, Lat Murray.
Speaking of running backs, though, before we move on to the next game, because I know a lot of people are kind of stuck or torn between these 2 running backs, but who do we want? Raheem Mostert or Devin Achane? Or who's the guy moving forward for you guys?
For me, I'll start quick. You have to roll with Raheem Mostert for now. The A-chain thing, I think, was only exploded more last week because of how that game got out of hand so early. And they're like, all right, cool. We're just going to continue to push him out there. So it's not like a Raheem Mostert, 70% opportunity share. I think you're going to see these guys, definitely A-chain made ground, but I don't think he's going to overtake Mostert because I think Mostert, obviously being the veteran in the room, still has that explosion, still has that speed. All I think this is going to do is kind of just bring them closer together. But I don't think Miami's just going to be like, here, Devon, take the baton and go with it. Like, I think they're going to utilize this in a very smart way of making sure both guys touch the field enough. Again, last week, you can say it a million times, 375 yards and 8 touchdowns. Like, you'll never see it again. But the efficiency at which they ran with in the receiving and the rushing game, I think says enough that you're going to see more A-chain. But for now, I'm gonna still have that baton in Raheem Mostert's hand as my lead back, and I think he's going to be the guy that you trust the most.
Terrible job by Nate Hackett last week.
Oh my
Corey,
Lord.
are you leaning one way or another, or are you kind of you find
Buffalo
yourself in the
Bills.
same
I
boat?
keep go with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills in this spot until somebody shows me different. And listen, I've been burnt betting against the Dolphins so far this year, and I don't want to continue to do that. But in this spot right here, it's the Buffalo Bills.
Okay, well, between the two running backs, Raheem Mostert.
Oh, you mean the two running backs? Raheem Mostert, yeah.
Raheem moving forward?
Yeah.
Okay. For sure. Well, I mean, that said, let's move on to the next game. I want to talk about what's going on in London. We got Jacksonville. We got Atlanta.
Why?
What? The only reason why is because, one, it's in London, and if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be the Toy Story game, right? Did y'all hear about that?
This is the Toy Story game, and also the Jaguars are basically living out there. They're out there till next weekend.
Okay, yeah, because they play back to back weeks?
They play their next weekend too. So I know people with the Jacksonville Jaguar contingent that's like, okay, we're locked in for 11 days.
Wow, that's dope, man. Imagine man,
that's not dope. Can you imagine?
That sounds terrible.
Yes, imagine you covered the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you in the middle of the year you got to go to London for 11 days. That's wild.
Your clock is all off. You still got to do your weekly work on the same time frame. Like,
exactly.
Your boss is still like, get this thing in by 9 a.m. And you're like, dog, no.
Look at the time difference. Look at the time difference. Man, I feel what you guys are saying, but man, I've never been there, so maybe my mind changes. But right now we got the Jacksonville
after Sunday.
As a
Monday
fan,
morning, I'm gonna be like, "What's up?" Like
as a fan for sure. But
no doubt, I guess maybe I'm speaking from the wrong perspective. But the Jacksonville Jaguars, though, they came into the season. They were supposed to be Super Bowl contenders. I know they're off to a slow start. Are you guys hopping off that bandwagon? Is this a get right type of game?
I never looked at them as a Super Bowl contender. They're not an elite AFC team. They're a wild card team. They make it to the division round. That's a good year for them. They won't be nowhere near the AFC Championship game. One of the more sillier bets coming into this year, the Jacksonville Jaguars to win that division with minus 150. And I was like, who are they fooling? And I'm sure some people bought into it. It's because some people had to bet into it because that number stayed there around. They were the same to win that division that Kansas City was to win their division. So that's a bet that you don't make right there. But they're not a championship team, but they should be able to bounce back this week. Go ahead.
Against the Falcons. Okay.
Yeah. I agree with everything Corey said. Like this Jaguars team, you asked the question, are you on the bandwagon or are you jumping off? I followed the line because it was the best quarterback in the division, and you're dealing with the rookie quarterbacks and CJ Stroud. You're dealing with Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis and that offensive line that was depleted. No Jonathan Taylor. What are they going to do? What's this offense going to look like? And then you had Tennessee, who obviously we have always seen look good on the surface, but the offensive line, they didn't really address it outside of Skoronski in that draft. Ryan Tannehill, we didn't expect to take a big leap or anything like this and stay below mediocre like he did. So it was like, well, Jaguars should hypothetically walk with this division. And then week 1 came around and they should have lost that game to Indianapolis. And at which point I watched that football game, I was like, nope, I'm done. Not even like I was never really there. I was just more of like, yeah, they should walk with it because they get the best quarterback, the most talent across the board. I'm not I'm not in line with the Jaguars really winning this division or being any type of a pressure on anybody in the AFC, especially. I think Trevor Lawrence still has a ways to go as far as his progression in the NFL. The talent is obviously apparent, but I mean the talent that's around him and his lack there of being able to really dominate games with that talent around him has kind of been evident. And then the defensive side of the ball, they have no pass rush. They have a bunch of these dudes that are supposed to be pass rush specialists and be able to be, so Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen, Caleb Von Chase, and you name it, they're there. They can't do anything. And that's one of the big things that's on the defensive side of the ball that's really holding Jacksonville back. Now you talk about Atlanta. Atlanta is a football team that has the talent as well, but their quarterback can't hit the broadside of a barn when he's targeting those studs, right? I think the one guy, and I think I may be jumping ahead of a question here, but the one guy and the one thought I have when you bring up this game is just Calvin Ridley revenge. And that's what I'm hoping to see.
Oh, my. I didn't even think about that. Man, this game should have been in Jacksonville, or this game should have been in Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Crazy.
Atlanta. He would have.
He's putting up 200. He's putting up 200.
I tell you what, somebody would have put $100 on an adjusted yardage share for Calvin Ridley over 300 yards, and that $100 might have came from Calvin Ridley.
Well, so I think reports earlier today were that Zay Jones is going to be out, and so is Zay Jones now being out. I know Christian Kirk has been, reintegrated back into the offense, but is this a bounce back week for Calvin Ridley? I mean, because he's had less than 50 yards in the last 2 weeks after a monster week 1.
I got to see it. I'm not the way that offense looks right now is not all that impressive to me. And a lot of people are Doug Peterson stands, and he should be able to get it together and turn this thing around. But it looks like he's not trusting what he's seeing right now. I'm talking about the quarterback with Trevor Lawrence. I know he's a better player than that. You're talking about that offensive line. He's patting the football. I've never seen Trevor Lawrence do that. So something is not clicking there, in my opinion.
Agree. Like, I don't know. I think it should be, again, on paper, it should be a Calvin Ridley bounce back game. But week 1, you talked about he had 7 first half receptions. Jaguars were up 14-7. They got behind in that game against Indianapolis. He only had 1 single reception in the second half. They ended up winning 31-21, not because of any of the offensive side of the ball, but more of special teams. Week 2, he had 5 targets in the first half. Kansas City was up 7-3. Over the next 25 minutes, he had 1 target, and then the final 5 minutes, he had 2 targets in that game. So it's very weird to see how they're dispersing their output to Calvin Ridley. And then, of course, in week 3, I think he had finished with 7 targets, but he was injured a quarter of the way or halfway through that football game, and he still ended up with 7 targets, 3 receptions for 40, including a drop on a back shoulder fade going into the end zone that he should have had for potentially 6. So I was one that was pro Calvin Ridley coming into the season because it was very apparent he was going to be the alpha in this offense. And the opportunity really hasn't been there consistently throughout the entire game. Like, he's a first half alpha right now. Like, they're giving him the ball in the first half as that dude. And then as the game wanes, they're like, yeah, well, how about Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk? And it's like the talent is just not on par with those two guys, apropos to a Calvin Ridley in an elite situation. So Evan Ingram actually is a guy in this offense that continually over the last 3 weeks has been a top 10 fantasy finisher at the tight end position. And I know that's not a hard thing to do, but in this offense, he looks like he's kind of the key cog or the glue to this offense is Evan Ingram. So that's kind of one guy I kind of trust and believe in. And then last week as well, if you listen to the TV cast of this game, they talked about asking Doug Peterson about Travis Etienne, and he's like, yeah, we want to get Etienne the ball between 19 and 25 times this game. He ended up with 19 carries exactly and 5 targets. So, like, they made a point to push the ball to Etienne. Now, last week in that game, they focused on that in the first half, and they were down 17 rip at the half, and then they continued to try to do it in the second half. So I think they're focusing on the wrong details. They need to be able to utilize, I don't know, to me, if you trusted Trevor Lawrence as your guy, you would put 3 and 4 wide with Ridley, with Ingram, with Kirk, and you utilize Etienne out of the backfield and get your speed in there with a couple guys and like utilize this entire offense, not be like, yeah, we got to get the running back, 19 carries. And it's like, he was one of the most prolific pass catchers in football, right? In college. Yeah. So I just think they're focusing on the wrong details right now as far as his offense goes. And I think they got a little bit of ways to go before they start clicking. So as far as picking the game, it's a toss-up for me right now.
Yeah, it's London, so I would go with Jacksonville, but it's nothing that's that I'll be entertaining this weekend.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. Well, man, speaking of entertaining, I want to talk about Monday Night Football. Before we move on to, our lineups, Seattle Seahawks at the New York Giants. Seattle's favorite right now by 1. It's essentially a pick 'em. We don't know if Saquon Barkley is going to play. Seattle, top 5 in the league in scoring. It scored 30+ in every game with the exception of week 1. And then the New York Giants, meanwhile, on the other side of the football on defense, have allowed 30+, if I'm not mistaken, in every game. And so how do we see this game playing out? Who are some guys on each side that we want to play in fantasy? Corey, I'll start with you.
This is going to be an interesting one right here. This is a very big spot for the New York Giants. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to say that this is like a season on the line spot right here, but I think it's time for the New York sports fan to be very realistic. And this is going to blow the New York sports fans' mind. The best team in that city right now is the New York Knicks. How crazy is that? Because obviously you see what's up with the Jets. They're not getting it done. This is October in the Bronx. The team in the baseball team in the Bronx is home. Now, when you look at the football team, a lot of expectations for Big Blue coming into the season, right? But once again, just like Jacksonville, they're not up there with Dallas and Philadelphia. They're close. They're more closer to the Falcons, Commanders, and teams like that. With that being said, they don't look the same as they did last year. I think the Giants have a culture issue. When the team goes from bad to good and everybody immediately wants to get paid, I got a problem with that. And I think that's what happened with the Giants. I don't think they're the same team. I think Seattle's a top 4 team in the NFC. No, I don't like them being a short road favorite. That's what I don't like. Hard, difficult game to handicap, but I think you fire up Tyler Lockett. I think you see Ken Walker get it going. And then listen, at the Giants, I would look for a deep shot a couple times with Jalen Hyatt. That's who they go to for, huh?
Even though we didn't see it last week against what should have been an exploitable matchup against the Cardinals.
That's who they go to for big plays.
Okay. Cody?
I want to say one thing that the first words I think you mentioned in this game was entertaining on Monday night, Seattle and New York Giants. I don't know if you can put the word entertaining in the same sentence as the Giants right now. Not quite yet for me. You did it,
but I just did. I know.
you just did. But I will say one big thing is a guy that we haven't seen in a little while. He played one game last year and been banged up before that. Is Jamal Adams is making his debut this week in New York, where he used to play in the same stadium, right, for the Jets. So he'll be back in this one. Tariq Woolen, the second-year speedster out of UTSA, will be back in this one for the Seattle defense. I love Seattle in this one. Like I said, I have not been impressed with the Giants so far this year. And I think Seattle, just like Corey said, I think they're a top 4, top 5 team in the NFC right now. And that, the NFC is not strong, but I think that does Seattle scoring 37 back-to-back weeks. This rush game is up there with some of the best in the league with Ken Walker as a focal point. He's kind of in his element right now, and he's been very efficient in the passing game as well. 8 for 8 in the receiving game, a 19% target share when he runs a route is Ken Walker. So guys I like in this game. Love Ken Walker, obviously, for those reasons. On the other side, I like Wan'Dale Robinson. I talked about him before. He had 5 targets on 22% snap share last week in that one. And then I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is a very interesting one because I think this game could get up to a point where, you talk about Lockett, you talk about DK Metcalf. Metcalf is banged up right now. I do think at the wide receiver position, you're going to continually see a rise on Jackson Smith-Njigba. Yes. I don't think anybody's going to touch him because he had 3 targets this week, 1 for 10. And people forget Smith-Njigba is a stud. And kind of Monday night is kind of where I always think of rookies getting their opportunities, rookies making a name for themselves and finally getting the camera put on them in prime time. And I think Jackson Smith-Njigba's got the talent and the opportunity potentially at hand. Of course, we don't know. I'm assuming Metcalf's going to play, but he did not participate in practice yesterday. So I like Jackson Smith-Njigba. I like Wan'Dale Robinson. I love Ken Walker in this one, and I love Seattle. Screw it. I love Seattle to score 37 again for the 3rd straight week in this one against the Giants and walk the dog.
If that happens, you know what's going to happen at the Meadowlands, at MetLife Stadium?
Brian Daboll's seat is going to be lit with a torch.
Yep, and it's going to be some booing. They will boo that team off the field if they go out there this week and have a bad performance on Monday night. It's coming because they thought there was optimism, and now it's no Yankees to fall back on. The Jets terrible. Oh man, Jesus! Oh, I feel bad.
Oh my gosh! And Brian Daboll is really like that as a coach, and so I hate.
He win assistant of the year. He was assistant of the year last year, right?
Coach of the year.
Also, just coming out right now, Andrew Thomas is not practicing today. Not a good sign for Monday night. And Andrew Thomas has been kind of like the strong point of that offensive line. On the opposite side, Evan Neal has struggled this year with Glowinski. So Andrew Thomas now not practicing today with a hamstring. Not good for the old Giants offensive line.
So before we move on to the next topic, I know defenses aren't really, talked about when it comes to fantasy talk, but are you guys high on the Seahawks defense this week as a potential play against that Giants offense? I mean, I don't think
Daniel Jones is turning the ball over again. He's been doing that. He stopped doing that last year. He's doing that again this year. I don't have no issue. I don't have no issue with that.
And then you got Jamal coming back, Reek coming back. So reinforcements are coming. Real fast though, Cody, are you
overrated though?
We can say that for another day, but Cody, do you are you high on the Seahawks at their defense at least as a play in fantasy this week?
Yeah, I'm fine with them. I mean, they're in that Monday slate, so I think you'll see them in a couple of lineups in that lineup. So, like I said, Jamal Adams comes back, Tariq Woolen. If either of those guys are, I don't know. I don't really have high expectations for Jamal Adams, but I mean, you are in that situation where if Daniel Jones turns the football over, I feel like Jamal Adams might be in the vicinity. So, and we know he's a stud. So, you know what? I'm just saying,
Hey, Cody, you see this? Y'all guys see this? The Browns. The Browns are a 1-point favorite. It moved 2 points. What happened? Did somebody hurt?
Oh, Deshaun Watson didn't throw today.
Okay, that must be what
that came out like 20 minutes ago. Yeah. Deshaun Watson did not throw. I think it was today
That's more maintenance related though, right? Like it's not like he's in danger of missing this game. I don't believe.
It must be if that line moved 2 points.
Right.
I don't know.
That's what I'm thinking. Because I know Baltimore's getting the offensive lineman back. I know 2 of them are coming back, Ronnie Stanley and I forgot who else. And then I think the receivers, I don't know if OBJ is set to play. We can touch on that another time.
We got Odell Beckham playing.
even though it's a revenge game against the Browns.
Odell Beckham is it would have Dalvin Cook had a revenge game.
Be nice. Come on, be nice.
That's different because his offensive line in New York is messy.
I wish the best for Odell Beckham. Sorry, Cody.
No, I know. I'm in line with you as well. You good.
We all do. It's all right. Before we do wrap up the show, though, y'all, I want to talk about lineups and the most optimal lineups that we could possibly set. Before we get into that, though, and kind of break it down position by position, you guys might not notice, but every week, twice a week, I drop, a bargain bill article and a fades article. And one guy that I'm fading, especially in DFS this week, this is going to sound crazy because I think he's a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. And we was just talking about this matchup, but Lamar Jackson. And according to FanDuel, he's the quarterback 4 at cost with a salary of $8,200. But that Cleveland Browns defense has been absolutely tenacious this season. Cleveland is at home. That pass rush has been absolutely monstrous. The secondary has been locked down. Jim Schwartz at defensive coordinator has been a revelation for this football team. Corey, I'm going to start with you. Am I crazy for fading Lamar Jackson this week?
I don't think you're crazy. Obviously, you make a good point about that Cleveland Brown defense, but what I'd be concerned with is this. This is a game that's going to come down to quarterback play. And Lamar Jackson's a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson. And in a game like this is the type of game where, you know how people always talk about quarterbacks and he don't have no weapons or he needs some weapons. Lamar Jackson is the weapon. In a game like this, Lamar Jackson to take over the game. So I would worry about Lamar taking over.
Okay. Cody, talk to me.
I like that, and I kind of have the same thoughts as Corey as far as Lamar being that piece. I also have seen the Cleveland Browns defensive line get after the quarterback a ton so far this year, and I think one of the utilizations that they've had with Myles Garrett, and I'll be interested to see if they use it again Sunday, is if they have Myles Garrett coming up from the middle over the top of the center, because if they do, you know exactly what that's going to do. That's going to push Lamar out the pocket, and I don't know if they really want that. I'd want to keep him obviously in the pocket for apparent reasons. But I think that Lamar's an interesting play. It's a very, very, very tough matchup as far as the defensive talent goes in Cleveland, but I do trust the talent around Lamar Jackson, and what I do trust and why I'm not completely fading him. I'm fading him to the point where I have him lower in my ranks than I expected, but I'm not completely fading him is because of the talent that Lamar Jackson brings to the table and his innate ability to be that dude, that one singular dude that, if everything around him blows up, guess who can make the tackle or miss?
You see, he can do it by himself. That's why fading him is so risky, even though it's against that great defense, is that Lamar he is the player that I think is more likely that can take over a game by himself.
The wrecker. Yep.
Hey, I don't disagree. So if it's not going to be Lamar Jackson, because it seems like you guys aren't nearly as, high on that stance as I am, is there a quarterback in fantasy this week that you guys are just completely out on, that you're just willing to completely fade? Like, no matter what happens, he's a fade for me?
Joe Burrow against Tennessee. I got as quarterback 21 in my rankings. You can find those at sportstopia.io as well. Quarterback 21, Joe Burrow. We just haven't seen it yet, and he's also got a tough defensive line to go up against in Tennessee. Everyone's like, well, if he's not going to do it against Tennessee, who's he going to do it against? But they forget the front end that the Tennessee defensive line brings to the table. And Burrow, if he's not 100%, I'm just not ready yet to kind of commit to having him as a consistent piece in my lineups. That would be my one at quarterback.
Dak Prescott.
Yep.
Well, we fading Dak Prescott against the Patriots defense. I like that call. That Patriots defense has been tough on everybody, including the Philadelphia Eagles.
If Dallas, the way Dallas plays is they want to get ahead of you, and when they get ahead of you, they unleash their pass rush on you, and then you start turning the ball over, and you give them short fields, and they can run the football and then get stalled in the red zone. But if you can get ahead of them and make them play, you can run on them, and then what happens is when the game gets tight, Prescott gets tight. So I fully expect that to happen. I think Dallas wins the game, but I think Dak Prescott does everything to help them lose it.
Okay, so for our quarterback phase this week, we got one from each person. We got Lamar Jackson, we got Dak Prescott, and we got Joe Burrow. Now I want to talk about some running backs. And Cody, I'll start with you. Are there any running backs that you're fading this week that you're not in love with this week?
Off the top, Derrick Henry, again, running back 21. It's just that's kind of like a baseline one. Him and Najee Harris, 21, 24. Those would be the two guys that, we continually want to see them do something, but the opportunities have just not been at hand as far as the efficiency goes, as far as what their lines are giving them, and as far as how they currently look. So Derrick Henry and Najee Harris, I have below guys like, Jerome Ford. I have below guys like Miles Sanders or Ramondre Stevenson, guys that I generally wouldn't love to play ahead of these other guys, but you kind of have to in the current state of the situations with both guys.
And Corey, before we move on to you, Cody, I saw in your running back rankings, you put Alexander Mattison in your top 10 at number 10. Are you not worried? I know the matchup is juicy against Carolina, and game flow is obviously going to be in their favor, but are you not worried about Cam Akers kind of eating into that workload a little bit this weekend?
I'm not worried about Cam Akers working into that workload at all. Like I like Cam Akers as a prospect, but until we see anything that points towards him actually being relevant, I'm not gonna worry about that at all. And especially being, he's been in the building for like 8 days now, technically since he was traded last Thursday. I don't think it's going to be a guy that's going to come in and all of a sudden get 9 carries. I just don't see that happening with Alexander Mattison. Against Alexander Mattison, and Madison last week kind of bounced back in an opportunity. The offensive line still sucks in Minnesota. They did get Dalton Reisner. We'll see if he's ever put into the lineup. I'd like to see that. But Madison, I have at running back 10 just because of kind of I talked about the guys below him. I like the matchup against Carolina. I think the Vikings are going to want to run the ball, and they have this innate ability to get into the 5-yard line and not score. And I think utilizing a guy like Madison out of the backfield more like they did Dalvin is a role that I can see Madison partake in this week. And he finished at running back 10 last week, running back 16 in week 1. But I got him at running back 10 this week. I think it's a probably a bit ahead of consensus, but I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it too. Corey, any running backs in mind, fade or shoot, play? It don't matter what.
When I say fade, this may come back to bite me, right? But I would fade DeAndre Swift. I understand he's looked like Jim Brown. I understand he's looked like Jim Brown recently. but the Commanders, the best part of their Commanders is their front, and the Commanders played Philadelphia well, and they play at Philadelphia well. So I'm just saying that. He run for another 200 yards this week, I'm done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've been hearing a whole lot of DeAndre Swift. Like everyone's behind him, and so for you to kind of be on the opposite end of that, I'd be real curious to see what happens this weekend. There are a couple wide receivers I want to touch on though real quick. And Cody, in your wide receiver rankings, you actually put this guy in your top 20, inside your top 20 at number 16 in a Tank Dell. I also included him in my bargain bin article For the rest of the season, and Cody, I'll start with you since you put him inside your top 20. For the rest of the season, can you see him, or is it feasible to see him crack in the top 10, or is he going to stay in that 10 to 20 range?
No, he ain't gonna crack. The top 10 is just way too loaded. Like you see Puka Nacua, I got him at 10 this week, but like even look at the guys behind him. It's Metcalf, Ridley, Olave, Debo, Evans. Like those are some studly pieces. And the only reason Puka is up there is because of the target share that you can expect on a weekly basis. Tank, you're not going to be able to expect that target share on a weekly basis because Nico Collins, in realistic situations and not blowouts like they did against Jacksonville last week, you're going to see Nico Collins be the guy that's targeted more often, I think, in this offense. Tank, you're playing upside. Tank, he can skate past everybody. And I think he's going to be a dynamic piece consistently in this offense. But there's more I lost the word. Volatility with there's more volatility with Tank Dell on a weekly basis than there is with a guy like Nico. So if there was no Nico existing, I think I would have much more trust in Tank getting more targets. But I just think Nico's going to be too much of a pain to allow Tank to put himself into that top, even 14 range. Like 16's really as high as I really trust putting him ever.
Right, and that is pretty high. But I've been high on Tank Dell, so I wanted to ask you about that.
Yep.
Corey, any receivers that we should be on the lookout for? Anybody you're fading in particular?
Nah, not really. No big fades this week in the receiver position with the way these teams are throwing the football all over the yard. I would say that these Washington receivers haven't done anything this season. You know what I'm saying? So, and that'll probably continue to be the case this week as well.
Okay, well, there's one guy I want to talk about before we do wrap up the show. I know I'm kind of going backwards as far as positions, but Alvin Kamara, first game back for the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, as we know, Jamal Williams is on IR. Kendre Miller didn't show too much last week. How do you guys feel about Alvin Kamara this weekend and moving forward? Cody, I'll start with you.
I like Kamara. I think it's fine. Reason being, I think it's fine. I have him at running back 9 this week because we've seen what he could do consistently, scoring 20 fantasy points in games on a career basis. Alvin Kamara is a stud, and I think he's in shape. I think he wants to play, and they're going to need him in this week. It doesn't look like Derek Carr is going to play, obviously. So Jameis Winston at quarterback. They do got Olave. Thomas has been a little underwhelming despite being a consistent target guy. But Alvin Kamara, they need this juice. They need this piece after that letdown against Green Bay last week. They're playing against Tampa. And I think that Kamara, as far as expectation goes, I think he's going to be able to jump himself back into the top 5 conversation, but I have him at 9 this week because I think I don't know if I'm expecting an 80% opportunity share from Kamara this week, but no Tony Jones, no Jamal Williams, and Kendre Miller, who is also coming off injury. I don't know. I just feel like the situation is going to be bundled up and given to Alvin Kamara this week.
I'm with him.
I bet that. Well, that just about wraps up the show, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Fantasy Fire and Ice NFL edition. Before we do go, though, I want to plug a couple of things. Be sure to check us out on the website at sportstopia.io, not sportstopia.com, but sportstopia.io for all of our articles, for links to all of our shows. Be sure to tune in Monday through Friday. Various times we're live every single day. And don't forget to scan that QR code. I know it's not currently present, but you can check out the Contrarian Edge Optimizer on the Fantasy Sports Logic website. Just go on fantasysportslogic.com. And now there's the code, top right-hand corner of the screen. Be sure to scan that. You get a 7-day test trial for just $1. And you guys seen a man at the beginning of the show, Boss Man himself, Sportstopia HQ Boss Man, Daryl. He spoke glowingly of it. And so I think that's really all you need to know. And that's it for Corey Parson at the Fantasy Exec, Cody at Carpentier NFL, and last but certainly not least, Steezy A. Smith. Y'all have a great Friday, a great weekend. Peace and blessings, and peace.